Audiobook Top, your new home for the finest selection of audiobooks available anywhere.
Imagine the profound, tactile chill of a London February. Not merely cold, but a pervasive dampness seeping into your very bones, painting the city in muted grays and sodden browns. The sky, a heavy quilt of cloud, presses down, muffling hope. It's a month of relentless drizzle, where pavements gleam with dull misery, and the air feels weighted by obligation, by the monotonous hum of daily life. Each umbrella seems to drip melancholy spring, an impossibly distant mirage. It is in this weary atmosphere our story begins. Now truly conjure that scene. Feel the damp, the subtle ache of unfulfilled desire. And then, against this backdrop of urban gloom, imagine turning the pages of a morning newspaper and stumbling upon a tiny, unassuming block of type. A small square, yet radiating a warmth, a promise so utterly incongruous with the world outside your window it might as well have dropped from a sunnier planet. This is what it said, word for word. A tiny revolution printed in stark black ink, to those who appreciate wisteria and sunshine, small medieval Italian castle on the shores of the Mediterranean to be let furnished for the month of April. Necessary servants left. Zweiboxvousen, the Times. Wisteria and sunshine. Just let those words linger, especially when your own view frames nothing but the weary backs of soot-stained houses, and the sky above is the exact color of old dishwater. February in London isn't just cold, it's profoundly shabby. It's a month of frayed tempers and worn-out patience, where the relentless grind of routine often suffocates the very breath of joy. But this advertisement, it whispered of something else entirely. Of brilliant azure skies, so vast they promise limitless possibility. Of ancient sun-warmed stones, fragrant with blossoming citrus. It spoke of a gentle, caressing breeze, carrying not the chill of the Thames, but the intoxicating perfume of wisteria in glorious bloom. It hinted at a place where time itself might graciously slow, where existing felt lighter, brighter, infused with wonder. And so, this simple notice, this quiet, audacious invitation, poses a truly profound and utterly tempting question, doesn't it? What would happen? What could possibly unfold, if for just one exquisite, sun-drenched month, you dared to shed the relentless, often crushing weight of your responsibilities? To leave behind the endless expectations, the tiresome obligations, the comfortable yet soul-draining routine that defines your existence in one dreary world, and step, perhaps hesitantly, then with burgeoning excitement, into another. What magic might begin to bloom, not just in an ancient Italian garden cascading with purple blossoms, but deep within the long-forgotten, yearning corners of your own heart? What new self might emerge, when wisteria and sunshine become your only companions, and the ceaseless demands of a drab February are but a distant, fading memory? It is a question that hangs in the air, a fragrant invitation, waiting to be answered. Welcome, dear listener, to a journey not merely through the pages of a beloved novel, but into the very heart of human transformation. We are about to immerse ourselves in Elizabeth von Arnim's radiant masterpiece, The Enchanted April. You might be familiar with its reputation as a charming, escapist romance, a sun-drenched Italian holiday for the soul. And while it is all of those things, offering delightful respite, to truly appreciate its genius, we must look beyond the surface, for this is, at its core, a profound story of psychological renewal. It's about women, stifled by circumstance and convention, finding their authentic selves amidst the jasmine-scented air and ancient stone walls of a Ligurian castle. It's a tale that whispers of liberation, of rediscovering long-lost joy, and of the potent magic that happens when we dare to step outside the familiar confines of our lives and embrace the unknown. This journey is not just about a geographical shift, it's about an internal blossoming, a shedding of old skins. This isn't merely an audiobook. It's what I like to call a humanized audiobook. My role here extends beyond simply voicing the words on the page. I'm inviting you to join me in a deeper exploration, an intimate analysis of these characters' inner lives, their unspoken anxieties, their hopes, their triumphs, and the subtle, often seismic shifts in their souls as they blossom under the Tuscan sun. My own fascination with this story stems from its timeless message, that it is never too late to reclaim your zest for life, to shed the burdens others have placed upon you, and to find your own patch of April enchantment, a place where genuine happiness can flourish. We'll trace their emotional landscapes together, understanding not just what happens, but why it matters so deeply. And who are these four extraordinary women embarking on this transformative journey? we have Mrs. Wilkins, the perpetually put upon doormat, whose boundless kindness has become her most restrictive cage. Then there's Mrs. Arbuthnot, the devout martyr, carrying the crushing weight of the world and her husband's sins on her shoulders, convinced that suffering is her spiritual duty. Next, Lady Caroline Dester, the dazzling socialite, outwardly vivacious, yet inwardly weary of the relentless demands of her beauty and fame, seeking escape from her own gilded cage. And finally, the formidable Mrs. Fisher, the Grand Dowager, stern, unforgiving, clinging fiercely to the ghosts of her literary past and the customs of a bygone era. 4 disparate women, each burdened by their past, each yearning, consciously or unconsciously, for something more. Their paths converge in Italy, setting the stage for an extraordinary awakening. Chapter 1. Strangers in the club. The Ladies' Club in London stood as a monument to hushed decorum, a mausoleum for vibrant thought. Here, conversation was not merely discouraged, it was an act of rebellion. Profound silence, broken only by rustling newspapers and polite coughs, veiled inner lives as carefully as voluminous skirts veiled ankles. Any spontaneous utterance, any genuine emotion was a vulgar disruption. Into this temple of repression Mrs. Lottie Wilkins had habitually wandered. Lottie, inherently unclubbable, felt London's damp chill seep into her bones and soul. Her domestic life, a monotonous ballet of duty with a well-meaning but prosaic husband, had left her with a gnawing emptiness. She was tired of the incessant rain, the unchanging view, and profoundly, exhaustingly, tired of herself. Across the room her gaze settled on Mrs. Rose Arbuthnot. Society's ideal of good, Mrs. Arbuthnot was handsome in a severe way, her face etched with a weary resignation Lottie's peculiar radar for unhappiness immediately recognized. An evangelist, devoted to good works, an aura of saintly suffering clung to her. But Lottie saw past the pious facade, glimpsing a shared, unspoken ache of spirit suffocating under its own virtues. Rose, too, seemed to be drowning in the joyless waters of her existence. Lottie's eye then caught a small advertisement in the Times, a medieval castle in Italy, available for a month, promising wisteria and sunshine. An absurdity, a wild, impossible dream, a splash of color in her drab world. But then, an even wilder impulse seized her. She looked again at Mrs. Arbuthnot, at the deep lines of silent sorrow. In that instant, a strange certainty bloomed. This woman, so different, was experiencing misery as profound as her own. With a sudden, violent surge of courage, Lottie rose. Her heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat of rebellion. To approach another club member unintroduced was social heresy. Propelled by a desperate need to break the unbearable monotony, she walked across the room. Every step felt a transgression in the overwhelming silence. "Excuse me," Lottie whispered, the words shockingly loud. Mrs. Arbuthnot looked up, startled, her severe features softening into bewilderment. Lottie held out the newspaper, finger trembling slightly at the advertisement. "I wonder," she continued, her voice gaining surprising conviction, "if you happen to want to go to Italy." It was an outrageous question, an act of glorious impertinence. But in that shared glance, that sudden, silent recognition, something shifted. 2 strangers, utterly dissimilar, found themselves bound by a common, unspoken unhappiness. Lottie's raw desperation cut through Rose's pious shell. For a moment, the club, its rules, its suffocating silence, ceased to exist. Only the shared hunger for beauty, for escape, for reprieve remained. And in that moment, a most improbable alliance began. Chapter 2. The Great Escape Plan. The whisper of Italy, a mere flutter in the soul of Mrs. Wilkins, had swiftly transmuted into a vibrant, undeniable vision, a month in a medieval castle, high above the shimmering Mediterranean. This was no modest cottage by the sea, no quaint pension in a bustling town. This was San Salvatore, a place steeped in history and romance, a private paradise glimpsed only through the tantalizing prose of a newspaper advertisement. The audacity of it, for 2 women whose lives revolved around the meticulous budgeting of gas bills and in the polite endurance of dreary husbands, was breathtaking. Imagine the sheer gall, the glorious, almost scandalous presumption of it. To pluck such a magnificent, impossible fantasy from the pages of a newspaper and cradle it like a nascent hope. For Mrs. Wilkins, whose very existence in Hampstead felt compressed and gray, and for Mrs. Arbuthnot, burdened by an almost oppressive saintliness, the thought of occupying such a place was a radical act of self-assertion. It was an escape, not just from London's perpetual drizzle, but from the suffocating ordinariness of their circumstances, from the quiet desperation that hummed beneath the surface of their polite lives. San Salvatore promised sunshine, beauty, and a freedom they had scarcely dared to dream of, let alone afford. And that, of course, was the formidable, unyielding truth: the cost. The advertisement, with its glorious descriptions of sun-drenched terraces and ancient stone, also presented a figure that, for two women of their means, was frankly prohibitive. It was a sum that laughed derisively at their individual savings, a grand total that seemed designed to keep such magnificent dreams firmly out of reach. Here, the airy lightness of the daydream collided head-on with the stony reality of their meager finances. But a dream, once it has taken root, is not easily dislodged. The impracticality, rather than extinguishing the desire, merely sharpened their resolve and, more importantly, their ingenuity. The solution, startling in its simple logic, presented itself. If one couldn't afford it alone, then more must share the burden. They needed 2 more recruits. 2 additional souls, preferably female, whose longing for escape was as keen as their own, and whose pockets, crucially, contained the necessary funds. This pivotal realization marked the true transition from a hazy, wishful thinking to a concrete, albeit still fragile plan. The castle, which had been an abstract ideal, suddenly became a tangible, albeit shared, goal. The discussions ceased to be about wouldn't it be lovely if and became instead, who could we possibly ask? They began to dissect their acquaintances, mentally sifting through social circles, weighing personalities against potential solvency. Could Mrs. Fisher endure Mrs. Wilkins's bluntness? Would Lady Caroline bring too much aristocratic chill? The very act of considering these possibilities, of calculating expenses and divvying up weeks, transformed the impossible into the merely difficult. The dream was no longer floating in the ether, it was being meticulously drawn onto a blueprint, each line representing a step towards its breathtaking reality. The Great Escape, once a whimsical fancy, was now an urgent, practical project, poised on the brink of execution. Chapter 3, Recruiting the Others. The bold headline, to those who appreciate wisteria and sunshine, having served its purpose in attracting Mrs. Wilkins and Mrs. Arbuthnot, now sailed further into the vast ocean of London society, a small, unassuming beacon in the grey dailiness of February. It landed upon the breakfast table of Mrs. Fisher, a venerable widow residing in an elegant, if somewhat stuffy, Hampstead flat. Mrs. Fisher was, in her own estimation, a direct spiritual descendant of the Victorian era. She believed implicitly in its grandeur, its moral rectitude, and its particular brand of restrained, yet profound, sentiment. Her conversations were liberally sprinkled with references to Tennyson and Carlyle, Dickens and Thackeray, as if these luminaries were still her contemporaries, their wisdom the only true currency. She moved through modern life draped in the invisible mantle of the past, perpetually evaluating the present against a glorious, irrecoverable era. Modernity, she found, was consistently wanting. When her eyes fell upon the advertisement, her initial thought was not of escape, but of suitability. A gentleman's medieval castle, refurbished, in Italy. Ah, Italy! The cradle of art, the destination of cultured Victorians. This promised a certain decorum, an appropriate setting for a woman of her sensibilities. She envisioned evenings of thoughtful discourse, perhaps even the occasional reading aloud from some improving classic. The idea of wisteria and sunshine appealed to her, not for their simple beauty, but for the picturesque backdrop they would provide to her carefully constructed self-image. It was an opportunity, she felt, to embody the very essence of refined leisure, to surround herself with the kind of respectful quietude that seemed so scarce in the bustling, uncouth present. She saw herself, a benevolent and wise figure, lending an air of intellectual gravity to the proceedings, sharing her vast knowledge of the past with those fortunate enough to be in her company. For Mrs. Fisher, the villa represented not merely a holiday, but a reaffirmation of her place in a world that, regrettably, had largely forgotten its manners. It was a chance to recapture a semblance of the status she felt she deserved, a status granted by breeding and a deep appreciation for culture. Far across London, in a flat whose stylish modernity screamed of wealth and effortless chic, the same advertisement found its way into the hands of Lady Caroline Dester. If Mrs. Fisher embodied the revered past, Lady Caroline was the epitome of a glamorous, yet profoundly weary, present. She was devastatingly beautiful, a fact that had, for years, been less a blessing and more a relentless burden. Every room she entered seemed to hum with the collective gaze of men, every conversation a thinly veiled attempt at courtship or conquest. They called her grabbing, a term applied to the effect she had on men, who, upon encountering her beauty and fortune, became hopelessly infatuated, desperate to possess her. She had everything society deemed desirable: lineage, fortune, astonishing looks. Yet, all she yearned for was absence. Absence of attention, absence of expectation, absence of the suffocating weight of admiration. To be beautiful, she had discovered, was to be relentlessly pursued, to be perpetually on display, never truly seen, only coveted. She craved anonymity, a space where she could simply be unobserved, unjudged, ungrabbed. The advertisement, with its quaint simplicity, spoke to her with a quiet promise. Wisteria and sunshine in a gentleman's medieval castle. It sounded remote, perhaps even a little eccentric. Crucially, it sounded unlikely to be frequented by her usual coterie of ardent admirers. She didn't want status, she wanted to shed it, to disappear into a picturesque obscurity. The idea of 4 women sharing a villa, no men, no grand social events, offered a tantalizing glimpse of a world where she might finally find respite. Her motivation was not to gain anything, but to escape everything, to escape the glittering cage of her own desirability, to find a quiet corner where the world might, for a precious few weeks, simply forget her. And so, from their utterly disparate worlds, driven by desires that were diametrically opposed, one seeking the validation of status and the echoes of a revered past, the other yearning for the sweet oblivion of solitude and an escape from a demanding present, both Mrs. Fisher and Lady Caroline Dester found themselves, quite independently, reaching for a pen. The unassuming advertisement for a medieval castle in Italy, with its promise of wisteria and sunshine, had cast its net wide, drawing in the most unlikely of companions. Chapter 4: Domestic Rebellions. But before the dream of sunshine could fully blossom, there were the domestic realities, the heavy chains of expectation and habit that bound these women to their everyday lives. For Lottie Wilkins, the vision of the Italian villa was exhilarating. Yes, but it was also a gauntlet thrown before a formidable, unyielding wall: her husband, Mellersh. Mellersh, with his precise accounts, his unwavering sense of what was proper, and his absolute conviction in his own infallible judgment. To tell him she planned to spend their money, his money, on a month of what he would undoubtedly deem frivolous self-indulgence, was a task that tied Lottie's stomach into knots of dread. Every potential phrase she rehearsed withered under the imagined blast of his cool disapproval, his sharp, annihilating questions. She was used to asking permission for the smallest deviations from their routine, for even the most minor expenditures. This, however, was a seismic shift, an act of almost unimaginable defiance. Her heart thumped a terrified rhythm against her ribs. The very thought of initiating such a conversation, of exposing her audacious desire to his chilling gaze, was a rebellion in itself, one she barely dared to contemplate, yet felt compelled to pursue. For Lottie, the journey to Italy was less about travel and more about finding the courage to step outside the narrow confines of her husband's granted consent. Meanwhile, for Mrs. Fisher, the temptation of the advertisement had ignited a different kind of internal battle. Rose had lived a life of devout self-sacrifice. Her every penny and moment weighed against the scales of duty and charity. To spend a considerable sum, even if it was her own, on a month of pure, unadulterated pleasure in Italy felt profoundly wicked. Her conscience, a relentless taskmaster, conjured images of the deserving poor, of missions needing funds, of her own moral failings in contemplating such an indulgence. Guilt, a familiar companion, wrapped itself around her heart, whispering reproaches. How could she justify this? Yet, beneath the layers of strict piety and ingrained self-denial, a small, persistent spark of yearning flickered. A yearning for beauty, for warmth, for an escape from the gray drudgery she had always embraced as her lot. The decision, when it finally solidified, was less an embrace of joy and more a reluctant, guilt-ridden concession to a desire she barely understood. She was granting herself, with a profound sense of unease, a permission she believed she had no right to claim. Both women, unbeknownst to each other, were bracing themselves for their own quiet insurrections. Lottie, confronting the external force of her husband's will, Rose, wrestling with the internal tyranny of her own conscience. In their individual struggles lay a common thread: the question of whether a woman, in the early 20th century, truly had the right to pursue her own happiness, to claim permission not from a spouse or a societal decree, but from the depths of her own soul. The sun-drenched promise of Italy beckoned, but first, these domestic battles had to be fought, and somehow, Chapter 5. The journey south. The rumble and sway of the train as it pulled away from the clamor of London felt, to each woman in her own way, less like a departure and more like a profound unburdening. It was a shedding of old skins, a severing of the invisible threads that had tethered them to their mundane realities. With every clickety-clack over the tracks, the anxieties of home, the burdens of expectation, the very weight of their English lives seemed to grow lighter, receding into the gray mist from which they had emerged. The familiar outlines of suburbia, then countryside, slipped past the window like forgotten memories, the past becoming an increasingly distant, less formidable presence. Initially, the landscape outside reflected their inner world muted, veiled in the soft, uncertain light of a European spring. England's gentle greens and ochres slowly gave way to the broader, more expansive fields of France, where the light, though still restrained, possessed a subtly different quality, a whisper of warmth yet to come. But as the miles melted away, as the train carried them further south, a gradual, miraculous transformation began to unfold. The hesitant pastels deepened, the skies brightened to an unapologetic blue, and the very air seemed to shimmer with a new, vibrant energy. Suddenly, Italy burst forth, a riot of unashamed color, terracotta roofs glowing under a fervent sun, olive groves a deep, passionate green, and the brilliant, dazzling hues of blossoming flowers painting the hillsides with audacious strokes. It was a landscape alive, pulsating with a warmth that seeped not just into the carriage, but into the very souls of its passengers. Yet, within the confines of their shared compartment, the four women, now irrevocably linked by their audacious vintage, navigated a delicate dance of initial awkwardness. Mrs. Wilkins, ever the nervous conciliator, offered hesitant pleasantries that often landed in silence, met by Mrs. Arbuthnot's pious reserve and terse, almost reluctant replies. Mrs. Fisher, the eldest and most formidable, absorbed every passing detail with an almost ferocious intensity, her gaze sharp and discerning, but her own contributions to conversation were sparse, punctuated by an occasional pointed observation. And Lady Caroline Dester, a creature of exquisite boredom and languid grace, simply observed them all with a detached amusement, her elegant form slumped in the corner, a silent testament to her initial disdain for such company. Their shared purpose, the promise of Italy, hung in the air, a future dream not yet strong enough to entirely bridge the chasm of their individual pasts and personalities. Each sat cloaked in her own thoughts, her own history, awaiting the true dawn of their metamorphosis. Chapter 6: Arrival. At San Salvatore, the final, winding ascent brought them not merely to a destination, but to the very threshold of a new existence. As the motorcar eased to a halt, a wave, warm and laden, broke over them, stealing their breath before their feet even touched the sun-baked ground. It was the scent of San Salvatore, and it was everything and more than their dreaming had dared to conjure. First, the air itself, a living thing, velvety soft against their skin, imbued with an intoxicating sweetness. Wisteria, yes, but not the polite, distant perfume of a garden wall. This was an overwhelming, generous torrent of purple and white blossoms, tumbling down ancient stone, their clustered weight releasing an almost edible fragrance that mingled with the sharp, clean spice of sun-warmed rosemary and the deep, honeyed languor of jasmine. Underneath it all, the clean earthy tang of rich soil and the faint, salty breath of the distant sea, creating a symphony for the nostrils that was both invigorating and utterly tranquilizing. Then, the light. It wasn't merely bright, it was a revelation. A golden liquid that poured itself over every surface, illuminating, transforming. It sifted through the countless leaves of the olive and lemon trees, dappling the flagstones with shifting patterns of brilliance and shadow. It kissed the ancient, sun-bleached stones of the castle, turning them from gray to a rich, warm ochre, making every detail, every weathered carving sing with life. The flowers in this light were not merely colored, they vibrated with an intensity they had never witnessed. Roses bloomed in impossible shades, their petals translucent, holding the very essence of the sun. Geraniums flared with a joyous abandon, while bougainvillea cascaded like molten jewels. For Mrs. Wilkins, the world seemed to tilt, not in dizziness, but in a sudden recalibration of her very being. The tightness in her chest, a constant companion of London life, dissolved. Her nerves, so long stretched taut, began to hum with a different kind of energy, one of pure, unadulterated wonder. Mrs. Arbuthnot, usually so composed, found her lips parted in a silent gasp. A lightness she hadn't felt in years seemed to lift her, not just from the ground, but from the burden of her own quiet melancholy. The anxiety, the nagging doubts, the practicalities of a world they had left behind, all seemed to evaporate in this luminous, fragrant air. Their senses, so long dulled by routine, were suddenly awake, exquisitely alive, drinking in every hue, every note of perfume, every nuanced whisper of the breeze. This was no mere holiday villa, this was enchantment made manifest. The brochure, a mere whisper of suggestion, had been an understatement of monumental proportions. Reality, in its boundless generosity, had not simply met their expectations, it had vaulted over them, leaving them breathless, humbled, and utterly overcome by a profound, soaring joy. They had hoped for a pleasant change. They had found paradise. Chapter 7. Lottie's metamorphosis. Of all the souls who first ventured into the enchanting embrace of San Salvatore, none was perhaps more susceptible, more utterly ripe for transformation, than Mrs. Wilkins. The timid little Lottie, who had fretted over every penny, every imagined slight, every social obligation, was slowly but surely dissolving, like a shadow at noon. In her place bloomed a woman of unexpected intuition, a woman who saw and felt deeply, and, perhaps most astonishingly, a woman who dared to speak her mind. It wasn't a conscious effort on her part. She wasn't striving to be different. Rather, she felt the change simply happening to her, as effortlessly and beautifully as a flower unfurling in the sun. She found herself articulating thoughts she wouldn't have dared whisper in Hampstead, observations so keen, so direct, that they often took her own breath away, let alone that of her companions. Her eyes, once downcast, now sparkled with a newfound light, fixed on the distant sea or the ancient stones, absorbing their very essence. Her walk gained a lightness, her voice a clearer, more resonant tone, free from the nervous inflections that once plagued it. "It's not us, you see," she declared one sun-drenched morning, her gaze sweeping over the others. "It's the place itself. It's doing the work. We just let it." This was Lottie's theory, her burgeoning intuition crystallized into a simple, profound truth. She believed San Salvatore possessed a benevolent, almost sentient magic, gently but firmly prying open their tightly clasped hearts. It was the air, she insisted, the light, the silence, the sheer, unadulterated beauty that washed over them, stripping away the accumulated dust of years. This wasn't a philosophical musing for Lottie, it was a profound, undeniable truth she felt in her very bones, a joyful exoneration from the burden of self-improvement. It wasn't her trying to be happy. It was happiness being made for her by the very stones and olive trees. And while Lottie's joy expanded, a radiant, almost childlike wonder, the others still carried their burdens with varying degrees of stiffness. Mrs. Fisher, for all her intellectual prowess, still clutched her judgments like a comforting shawl, observing the world with a dry, critical eye. Lady Caroline Dester, though softening at the edges, maintained her elegant detachment, a practiced aloofness that shielded a deeper weariness. Even Mrs. Arbuthnot, gentle and spiritual, seemed to resist the full surrender to unadulterated pleasure, still shadowed by her past acts of piety and sacrifice. Lottie, however, was already dancing in the light. Her happiness was so unforced, so genuine, that it shone like a lamp in the quiet corners of their shared villa, a silent, persistent invitation to joy. Her metamorphosis wasn't just a personal blossoming, it was the first tender, vibrant shoot pushing through the hardened ground of their collective pasts, a promise of the verdant life that San Salvatore held for them all. She was the first to change, and in her burgeoning delight, she unknowingly illuminated the path for the rest. Chapter 8. Rose's resistance. Mrs. Arbuthnot, or Rose, as she was known only in the deepest, most private chambers of her own heart, arrived at San Salvatore not with the expected rush of delight, but with a profound sense of apprehension. The very air, soft and laden with the scent of unseen blossoms, felt suspiciously light. Sunshine, too generous, too warm, streamed across her path, a brazen invitation to abandon the familiar gloom of dutiful living. For Rose, happiness was a dangerous, almost blasphemous state. Her upbringing, interwoven with rigid religious tenets and her husband's unyielding view of piety, had forged in her the unshakable conviction that true righteousness lay in self-denial, in quiet suffering, in a ceaseless vigilance against the worldly seductions of ease and joy. Pleasure, in her meticulously ordered moral universe, was a deceptive mirage, a frivolous indulgence that diverted the soul from its arduous path towards spiritual grace. To feel joy truly and deeply was to risk an appalling moral laxity, to invite the very condemnation she spent her life striving to avert. The garden, then, with its audacious beauty, became an immediate battleground. The ancient stone walls, draped in cascades of magenta wisteria, seemed to mock her carefully cultivated sobriety. Roses, not merely blooming but exploding in a riot of color and fragrance, spilled over trellises and arches, their velvety petals catching the light with a wanton disregard for moderation. The air hummed with the drowsy buzz of bees, the distant murmur of the sea, the whisper of leaves, a symphony of unearned contentment. Rose saw it all, every vibrant detail, yet she saw it through a veil of suspicion, her mind actively rejecting its seductive charm. Each burst of color was too vivid, each waft of perfume too intoxicating. She felt a duty to resist, to remain unswayed, as if acknowledging such beauty too fully would be a betrayal of all she believed in. Her gaze, rather than lingering, would skim past the most spectacular blooms, seeking out a patch of bare earth, a slightly withered leaf, anything that confirmed the inevitable decay and transience of all earthly delights. Her mind, a tireless engine of shoulds and musts, yearned for the predictable gray of London, for the ceaseless round of charity work, the solemnity of sermons, the comforting weight of her responsibilities. There, she knew her place, her purpose. She was indispensable, busy, eternally useful. Here, amidst the sun-drenched silence, there was nothing to do asterisk, only to be asterisk. And being, simply existing in a state of untroubled receptivity, felt like an appalling luxury, a surrender to idleness. How could one simply breathe amidst such irresponsible, extravagant beauty, when there was so much suffering in the world, so many souls to save, so many moral obligations to uphold? Each breath of scented air, each ray of warmth that caressed her cheek, was met with an internal recoil. This joyous freedom felt like a direct challenge, an insidious invitation to abandon the very principles that had defined her entire existence. She clutched her worn prayer book, not for solace, but as a shield against the insidious allure of unadulterated happiness. Her conscience, a diligent sentinel, whispered constantly this is not right. This is not for you. You must resist and so, Mrs. Arbuthnot rose, stood amidst Eden, fighting with every fiber of her being against the treacherous temptation of delight. Chapter 9. Mrs. Fisher's fortress. The quiet harmony that had begun to settle over San Salvatore was, in one decisive moment, shattered by the arrival of Mrs. Fisher. She descended upon the villa not merely as a guest, but as an institution, a formidable presence whose very carriage bespoke a lifetime of unquestioned authority. Her first words, delivered with a crisp, unyielding precision, were not a greeting but an assessment. She moved through the sun-drenched rooms with a discerning eye, an unmistakable proprietorial air, and a singular, unexpressed demand for the best, the most commanding vista from the finest chamber. The very choice of her initial lodgings was not a negotiation but a declaration of intent, a subtle skirmish in which her victory was predetermined, regardless of the claims of her less assertive housemates. Once ensconced, her control extended effortlessly to the very fabric of daily discourse. Conversations, however they began, invariably found themselves channeled, redirected, or abruptly concluded by Mrs. Fisher's firm hand. A tentative observation from one of the younger women about the local flora would be met not with engagement, but with a swift, often dismissive, pivot. "Ah, yes, flowers," she might declare, "though I recall Tennyson once remarked to me on the superior bloom of the English rose, did he not? We spent a charming afternoon debating precisely that, beneath the most vigorous wisteria at his country home." These casual references to the illustrious departed were not anecdotes shared for merriment, but formidable tools of validation. Her worth, her consequence, her very right to command attention, were inextricably linked to her intimate acquaintance with the luminaries of a bygone era. Tennyson, Carlyle, Ruskin, their hallowed names were not just dropped, but deployed, like seasoned troops marshalling to defend her unassailable position at the head of every discussion. Yet, even within the fortress of her self-assured routine, a silent siege had begun. The garden, with its audacious riot of color and fragrance, paid no heed to Mrs. Fisher's meticulously planned schedule or her intellectual pronouncements. Initially, she regarded it with a detached, almost clinical disapproval. Frivolous, really untamed. But the persistent warmth of the Tuscan sun, the sweet, pervasive scent of orange blossom, the sheer, audacious beauty spilling from every terracotta pot and ancient wall, began to work upon her with a slow, insidious charm. A cup of tea on the terrace, intended to be a brisk, efficient affair, would stretch by a few extra moments as her gaze was involuntarily drawn to a particularly vibrant bougainvillea. A planned letter-writing session might be delayed as the murmur of bees from a nearby jasmine vine seemed to beckon her outside, if only for a moment's contemplation. The garden did not demand her attention, it simply was, and in its insistent, organic presence, it began to chip away, imperceptibly, but inexorably, at the rigid ramparts of Mrs. Fisher's carefully constructed world. Chapter 10. The solitude of Lady Caroline Dester, or Scrap as she was known to those who felt they could claim a piece of her, arrived at San Salvatore not for camaraderie, but for a profound, almost desperate, quietude. Her beauty, that luminous, almost painful perfection, had been her gilded cage for as long as she could remember. From the moment she stepped into society, she was an object, not a person. Her presence was always an event, her entrance a tableau, her conversation a performance. Men adored her, women envied her, and the world collectively demanded that she simply be beautiful, be charming, be a delightful adornment to any gathering. She was utterly weary of it. Exhausted by the incessant gaze, the constant expectation to sparkle, to captivate, to fulfill the unspoken role of the most exquisite woman in the room. Her very existence felt like a public spectacle, and the effort of perpetually maintaining that flawless facade had drained her to her core. She craved invisibility, the sweet anonymity that only true solitude could offer. San Salvatore, with its ancient walls and sun-drenched silence, had promised precisely that. A refuge, a sanctuary where she could finally shed the heavy cloak of public persona and simply be. But even here, in this remote Italian haven, the tendrils of human need seemed to reach for her Mrs. Wilkins, with her guileless enthusiasm, and Mrs. Arbuthnot, with her gentle but persistent requests for company, were not malicious, certainly not. Yet, in their desire for her presence at tea, their suggestions for shared walks, their innocent attempts at camaraderie, Lady Caroline felt the familiar pressure mount. They, too, wanted a piece of her, not for her beauty in a societal sense, perhaps, but for the light she brought, for the interesting enigma she presented. They wished to understand her, to share her, to bask in her quiet glow. And each flicker of that desire, however well-intentioned, was a further erosion of her precious, longed-for solitude. The irony was not lost on her. For years, she had felt a crushing loneliness, an aching void, even when surrounded by throngs of admirers. In the grand ballrooms of London, amidst a cacophony of voices and laughter, she was profoundly, exquisitely alone. That loneliness was a product of being unseen, truly unseen, behind the dazzling veneer. Here in the quietude of a Tuscan villa, with only a handful of others, she yearned for a different kind of alone, a deliberate, chosen isolation where she could finally hear her own thoughts, unburdened by the need to respond, to please, to perform. She didn't want to feel lonely, she simply wanted to be alone. The absence of the crowd was a blessing, but the presence of even a few well-meaning souls became, for her, an unexpected and frustrating barrier to the deep, healing solitude she had traveled so far to find. All she truly desired was to be utterly, completely, beautifully forgotten, if only for a little while. Chapter 11 Friction in Paradise. The sun, which had hitherto blessed San Salvatore with an almost indecent brilliance, now seemed to cast longer, more knowing shadows, particularly within the walls of the old castle. For as the days wore on, the initial glow of shared enchantment began to dim, replaced by the inevitable friction of disparate personalities rubbing shoulders, particularly at the dinner table. This communal meal, meant to be a moment of pleasantry, had instead become a subtle battlefield. Mrs. Fisher, with her formidable presence and a voice that seemed to command attention even when merely inquiring about the salt, invariably secured the seat with the optimal view. Her pronouncements, often beginning with a declarative "I have always found," served as a kind of social benchmark, a silent instruction on how one ought to think, feel, or behave. Woe betide anyone who dared to offer a differing opinion, for Mrs. Fisher possessed a terrifying ability to make disagreement feel like a personal affront. Rose Arbuthnot, ever mindful of her Christian duty to be charitable, struggled valiantly against the rising tide of irritation. She watched Mrs. Wilkins' dear Lottie with a growing bewilderment. Lottie, utterly impervious to the invisible currents of social disapproval, would burst forth with observations that struck Rose as wildly inappropriate or alarmingly naive. One evening Lottie, having quite forgotten herself in the sheer delight of a particularly vibrant sunset, exclaimed, "Oh, isn't it just too much? I feel as though my soul is turning into a butterfly." A hush fell, punctuated only by the clinking of Mrs. Fisher's cutlery. Lady Caroline merely raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement, or perhaps resignation, crossing her perfectly composed features. Rose, meanwhile, felt a blush creeping up her neck, silently praying for Lottie to cultivate a modicum of decorum. The humor, sharp and often unspoken, lay in these very moments of delicate tension. A simple query from Lottie, "Do you think the little lizards like crumbs?" could be met with Mrs. Fisher's withering, "My dear Mrs. Wilkins, I hardly think the natural habits of reptiles are suitable dinner conversation." The slight pause, the careful enunciation of Mrs. Wilkins, a deliberate distancing from the more intimate Lottie that Mrs. Fisher sometimes allowed herself, spoke volumes. Rose would then jump in, offering a strained observation about the excellent quality of the olive oil, desperately trying to smooth the ruffled feathers, while internally wishing for a less vivacious companion. Lady Caroline, a silent connoisseur of human foibles, observed it all with an almost imperceptible wry smile. She rarely intervened, finding the unfolding drama oddly compelling. Her contribution was often a perfectly timed, perfectly ambiguous comment that could be interpreted as sympathy, disinterest, or mild mockery. When Mrs. Fisher once lamented the absence of a proper English breakfast, Mrs. Wilkins innocently offered, "But aren't the oranges simply asterisk bursting asterisk with sunshine?" Lady Caroline, with a faint sigh, remarked, "Indeed. A most inconvenient burst, sometimes." The subtle dig, aimed gently at Lottie's relentless optimism, was a masterpiece of passive aggression, appreciated only by herself and perhaps, subconsciously, by Rose. As the days unfolded, the dining room, with its antique elegance, transformed into a stage where these four women, each clinging to her own version of propriety and happiness, performed a delicate, often comical, dance of cohabitation. The friction, initially a faint whisper, was growing, promising to test the very foundations of their shared, Enchanted April. Chapter 12. The Garden as a Character. In this part of our journey, we delve deeper into the very soul of San Salvatore, a soul not woven from stone or story alone, but from the vibrant, breathing tapestry of its natural world. Here, the garden is not merely a setting, it is a sentient force, a silent, verdant physician presiding over a remarkable transformation. Imagine, if you will, the vision that greeted them, especially Mrs. Wilkins, whose very spirit seemed to unfurl with the blossoms. The wisteria, a cascading torrent of amethyst and lilac, draped itself over the ancient walls, a fragrant curtain that swayed with the gentlest of breezes. It spoke not of haste, but of patient growth, of an almost languid beauty that had taken seasons, years even, to achieve such magnificent exuberance. And beyond the immediate embrace of the wisteria, stood the sentinel cypress trees, dark majestic spikes piercing the impossibly blue sky. They whispered of permanence, of rootedness, a stark contrast to the fleeting anxieties the women carried. Then, the sea, a vast, shimmering canvas stretching to the horizon, its rhythmic sighs a constant lullaby. The sheer expanse, the unhurried ebb and flow, demanded a surrender to its ancient pace. No longer could the urban clamor dictate their internal rhythms. The environment itself became a gentle, yet insistent master. The pervasive warmth, the heavy, sweet air, the sheer, overwhelming beauty conspired to make haste seem not just unnecessary, but almost an affront. The need to rush, to plan, fret, began to dissolve. They found themselves simply asterisk being asterisk, observing the sunlight shift across the stone, listening to the buzz of bees, feeling the cool touch of ancient moss. It was an enforced slowness, a deliberate unburdening of time that allowed their overtaxed minds and spirits to finally catch their breath. This profound connection, this undeniable pull towards the living world, echoes a deep-seated human instinct, a concept known as biophilia. It is the innate tendency to connect with nature and other living systems. For these women, arriving jaded and weary, San Salvatore's garden wasn't just pretty, it was a potent elixir. The intricate patterns of leaves, the vibrant hues of flowers, the ceaseless murmur of insects, the clean, salty tang of the air, each element resonated with something fundamental within them. Their anxieties, once sharp and insistent, began to blur at the edges, smoothed by the sheer, unhurried presence of life unfolding around them. The garden offered solace without judgment, a restorative balm for minds long accustomed to concrete and constraint. It was a space where healing occurred not through active pursuit, but through passive absorption, through the simple act of existing within its benevolent embrace. Here, surrounded by the exuberant dance of nature, they found a quiet reconnection to themselves, a rediscovery of joy that felt as natural and inevitable as the blooming of a flower after a long winter. Thus, the garden, with its wisteria and cypress, its endless sea vista, proved itself the true alchemist of San Salvatore, transmuting weariness into wonder, discord into harmony. It truly became a character in their story, a silent, powerful force that invited them not just to witness its beauty, but to become part of its enduring, healing magic. Chapter 13. Lotie's radical invitation. The air in San Salvatore was, by now, a silken shawl of contentment. Days had unfurled like perfect blossoms, each one more fragrant than the last. Mrs. Wilkins, no longer a wilting rose but a vibrant, blooming one, found joy in every sunbeam, every ancient stone. Lady Caroline, though still prone to her elegant aloofness, seemed to thaw by degrees, her sharp edges softened by the ceaseless beauty. Even the absent Mrs. Fisher was, in her own way, content, blissfully unaware of the quiet revolution occurring in the souls of her compatriots. But it was Lottie Wilkins, her transformation the most profound, who held the most radical thought. She had come to San Salvatore fleeing a specific, stifling reality, one that included her husband, Mellersh. Yet, in this sun-drenched sanctuary, in the profound quietude that allowed her spirit to unfurl, a different Mellersh began to form in her mind. Not the Mellersh of endless committee meetings, of cautious penny pinching, of intellectual pronouncements she barely understood. No, this Mellersh was different. Or rather, she was different, and perhaps, he would be different here. One evening, as the last amber light bled from the sky, painting the distant mountains in hues of violet and rose, Lottie, her eyes bright with a sudden, startling conviction, made her announcement. "I've written to Mellersh," she declared, her voice surprisingly steady, yet infused with an almost giddy excitement. "I've asked him to come." The silence that followed was not the peaceful hush of the evening, but a sharp, sudden vacuum. Mrs. Wilkins, who had been humming a little tune to herself, froze, her teacup suspended halfway to her lips. Lady Caroline's exquisite eyebrows, already arched in their habitual elegance, seemed to ascend another fraction of an inch, conveying an entire novella of cool dismay without a single uttered word. "To come." Rose finally managed, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the delicate peace they had so carefully constructed. "To ***." Lady Caroline merely turned her head slowly, her gaze resting on Lottie with an intensity that would have withered a lesser woman. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air, weighted with dread. "A man." Here the very thought seemed an invasion, a sacrilege against the feminine sanctuary they had so recently reclaimed. Their haven, their precious, hard-won solitude, purchased at such personal cost, now threatened by the very species they had sought to escape. Lottie, however, remained undaunted. The light of her conviction burned too brightly to be dimmed by their horror. "Yes," she affirmed, her voice gaining strength. "I've told him about the wisteria, and the sunshine, and the quiet. I think he would appreciate it." Rose clutched her teacup to her chest. "But husbands," she stammered, the word itself tasting like ash after the sweet nectar of their freedom. "We came here to get away from them." "Precisely," Lottie countered, a new, gentle wisdom emanating from her. "But don't you see? We have got away. We're not the same women who left England, and this isn't the same England. This place, it transforms you. It unlocks something. I believe it will unlock something in Mellersh too. He's not going to be the Mellersh who comes to San Salvatore, he'll be the Mellersh of San Salvatore. A different person entirely, or at least, seen through different, clearer eyes." There was an earnestness in her gaze that softened Rose's immediate alarm, though Lady Caroline still maintained her elegant, aristocratic skepticism. For Lottie, the journey was no longer one of mere escape, but of reintegration, of finding a way to live harmoniously with the very elements that had once seemed oppressive. It was a bold step, a recognition that true freedom wasn't just about removing oneself from discomfort, but about cultivating a spirit capable of finding grace within it, even of transforming it. The prospect of Mellersh's arrival hung in the fragrant air, a challenge, a fascinating, terrifying experiment. The sanctuary, once a refuge from men, was now, through Liddy's radical invitation, poised to test its power on a man. And in that moment, the true magic of San Salvatore felt more potent, more profound than ever before. Chapter 14. Rose's secret longing. Rose Arbuthnot, behind her carefully constructed walls of righteousness, had always viewed her marriage as a duty, a necessary, often inconvenient aspect of her earthly sojourn. Frederick, dear Frederick, was so utterly serious, so easily amused, so worldly, so entirely spiritual. She'd believed, with a certainty now shockingly brittle, that her piety kept her pure, elevated her above earthly fray, including her husband's demands. She'd spent years cultivating a certain coolness, a detached dignity she mistook for spiritual superiority. His jests, his clumsy but genuine affections, his simple human need for warmth, she'd met them all with quiet, unyielding disapproval, a silent judgment she felt was sacred. She'd retreated behind her Bible, her good works, a frigid politeness that had, she now realized with a sickening lurch, exiled him from her heart long before he sought solace elsewhere. The San Salvatore sun, the wisteria scent, the profound quietude, had begun to melt her icy armor, and in its melting, an unbearable truth surfaced. It wasn't Frederick lacking. It was her rigid righteousness hadn't been a shield, but a sword, cutting her off from human connection. She hadn't driven him away because he was bad, but because she'd made herself an impossible woman. A wave of profound regret, sharp enough to steal her breath, washed over her. She remembered his boyish grin, the way his eyes would crinkle, the surprising gentleness of his touch. She remembered the simple comfort of his presence, a comfort she had deliberately extinguished. She'd mistaken its absence for peace, when in truth, it was a gaping, unacknowledged wound. A desperate, aching longing bloomed utterly new and terrifying. She wanted him back, not the idea of a husband, not the duty, but ***. The flawed, laughing, worldly Frederick she judged so harshly. She wanted to undo the coldness, erase the disapproving glances, offer the warmth she'd selfishly withheld. She wanted a second chance, a fresh start, a possibility of tenderness she had spurned. The thought was audacious, almost blasphemous to her former self, yet it pulsed with vibrant, undeniable hope. Oh, if only it were not too late. If only she could tell him she missed him. Chapter 15. The arrival of Mellersh, the idyllic peace of San Salvatore, a haven of sun-drenched beauty and burgeoning camaraderie, was about to be profoundly disturbed. The women, having settled into a comfortable rhythm of shared meals and quiet contemplation, were utterly unprepared for the thunderous arrival that shattered the afternoon's golden hush. A vehicle, bumping and groaning up the winding track, heralded the unexpected. It was not a delivery, not a local farmer, but something far more potent, far more English. When Mr. Mellersh Wilkins, stout and indignant, strode into the villa's sunlit hall, he resembled less a returning husband and more an invading general surveying conquered territory. His very presence seemed to suck the air from the room, replacing it with a palpable tension. His eyes, quick and critical, darted across the simple, charming furnishings, dismissing them with a sniff. He was a man of firm opinions, and his immediate judgment of this sun-baked haven, and indeed, of his wife's companions, was one of profound disapproval. "Really, Lottie," he began, his voice a low, aggrieved rumble, "what is all this? It's terribly rustic. And who are these people?" He made no effort to lower his voice as Lady Caroline and Mrs. Arbuthnot, both startled, emerged from the drawing room. His gaze lingered on Mrs. Arbuthnot, a flicker of something akin to suspicion, before settling on the elegant Lady Caroline, whom he clearly deemed an inappropriate associate for his wife. He was accustomed to a world of order, of predictable propriety, and San Salvatore, in its untamed charm, was a direct affront. He stood, hands clasped behind his back, a picture of put-upon martyrdom, his hat still firmly planted on his head as if he might bolt at any moment. But first, there were demands. "I have had a most arduous journey," he announced, as though he had personally wrestled the train across the continent. "I require a bath, immediately. A proper hot bath, the bath. The women exchanged nervous glances. The villa's bathing arrangements were, to put it mildly, temperamental. There was a contraption, a sort of rebellious brass boiler that resembled a distressed octopus, designed to heat water with a primitive spirit lamp. It required skill, patience, and a certain philosophical acceptance of its quirks. Mellersh, a man utterly devoid of practical mechanical aptitude, was about to meet his match. He retreated to the bathroom, his pronouncements still echoing in the hall. Soon, a cacophony erupted. There were metallic clangs, furious spluttering sounds, a series of increasingly frustrated grunts, and then a cloud of thick, acrid smoke began to billow from beneath the bathroom door, accompanied by a rather alarming hiss. Lottie, her heart pounding, exchanged worried glances with Lady Caroline, who merely raised an elegant eyebrow, and Mrs. Arbuthnot, whose lips twitched almost imperceptibly. The smoke intensified, filling the small room, the distinct aroma of scorched paraffin mingling with the smell of wet wool. There was a sudden, muffled yelp, followed by a tremendous splash. Then, silence, a heavy, pregnant silence. Finally, the door creaked open, and Miss Mellersh Wilkins emerged. But this was not the pompous, self-assured man who had arrived minutes before. This was a man utterly transformed. His hair, normally slicked back with meticulous precision, hung in damp, sooty tendrils. His shirt, what remained of it, was soaked and blackened, clinging to his portly frame. His trousers were askew, and a smudge of grease adorned his nose. He was, in a word, a mess. The indignity of the situation had stripped away his usual bluster, leaving him for a fleeting, comical moment, vulnerable and exposed. He looked utterly bewildered, like a child who had accidentally ignited a firework indoors. The grand arrival, the critical judgments, the indignant demands all had dissolved in a puff of smoke and a deluge of lukewarm, sooty water. For the first time since his arrival, Mellersh Wilkins was speechless, his pomposity drowned, if not in water, then certainly in the sheer absurdity of his predicament. and in that moment, a new, unexpected dynamic was born in San Salvatore. Chapter 16. A man transformed the sun. That golden artist of San Salvatore was not content merely to paint ancient stones or warm the distant sea. With deliberate grace, it penetrated the very souls of those who sojourned there, softening hardened edges, illuminating forgotten corners. And of all the souls touched by this benevolent light, perhaps none was more profoundly, more unexpectedly transformed than that of Mr. Mellersh Wilkins. He had arrived a man encased, not in armor, but in the equally formidable shell of professional propriety and ingrained habit. Every gesture, every utterance, it seemed, was filtered through the precise, cautious lens of a solicitor. His concern for reputation, his quiet, constant critique of his wife, Lottie, his very posture rigid, defensive, all spoke of a man perpetually on guard, observing life rather than participating in its unscripted dance. But here, amidst the wisteria and the jasmine, beneath the unwavering azure of the Italian sky, the shell began, imperceptibly at first, to crack. The sheer, overwhelming beauty of the place demanded a different kind of observation, one not rooted in judgment or analysis, but in simple, unadorned appreciation. With no clients to impress, no social standings to uphold, Mellersh found himself, for the first time in years, truly unoccupied. And in that glorious idleness, a strange and wonderful thing began to happen. He began to see Lottie, not Mrs. Wilkins, his slightly scatterbrained wife whose impracticalities had long been a source of exasperation, but Lottie herself. The woman who, in their younger days, had captivated him with her earnestness, her peculiar charm. He saw her now bathed in a glow of almost childlike joy, her eyes alight with a wonder he hadn't witnessed in decades. Her follies, once irritants, now seemed endearing. Her enthusiasm, once tiresome, now struck him as refreshingly genuine. The way she laughed, a sound he'd long unconsciously filtered out, now resonated with a simple, pure delight that was, he realized, quite infectious. The stiffness, that ever-present solicitor's stiffness, began to melt away. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual, imperceptible softening, like a hardened lump of clay yielding to a sculptor's touch. His shoulders seemed to lose their perpetual tension. His gaze, once sharp with scrutiny, mellowed into relaxed observation. He found himself smiling for no professional reason, a real, unbidden smile that reached his eyes. The weight of London, of expectation, of being Mr. Wilkins, solicitor, began to lift, revealing the man beneath, a man he'd almost forgotten. And with this new sight, this profound internal loosening, came the return of something truly precious. Something he hadn't known was merely dormant, not dead romance. It was not the fiery passion of youth, but a gentle, tender resurgence. He remembered the feeling of wanting to protect her, to cherish her. He found himself watching her with a warmth he hadn't felt since their honeymoon. There was a quiet yearning, a renewed connection that bypassed the practicalities and responsibilities of their shared life and reached directly for the heart of their original bond. San Salvatore, with its ancient magic, wasn't just transforming Mr. Wilkins, it was, with infinite grace, restoring to Lottie the husband she had once known, a man now truly seeing her for the very first time in years. The Wilkins marriage, like the villa itself, was being exquisitely restored, brick by loving brick, under the benevolent gaze of the April sun. Chapter 17. Mrs. Fisher's softening the fragrant air of San Salvatore, rich with lemon blossom and ancient stone, began its slow, insidious work on Mrs. Fisher. For so long, her mind had been a quiet, crowded room, filled with the meticulous furniture of memory, particularly the imposing silhouette of her late husband. His influence, though long gone, still dictated the rhythm of her days. But here, in this sun-drenched haven, the light seemed to possess a curious power to dissolve the shadows of the past. The ghosts of memory, usually so persistent, found themselves gently, politely, yet firmly ushered aside by the insistent, vibrant hum of the present. She began to notice the garden, the way a bougainvillea pulsed against the ochre wall, the liquid song of a blackbird, the resilience of a tiny weed. These were not observations she catalogued, they were simply ***, absorbed, felt. She found herself responding to the world, not merely reacting to her internal dialogue. And then there was Lady Caroline. The younger woman, beautiful and detached, had, until now, been a distant figure in Mrs. Fisher's new existence. But as the days unfolded, Mrs. Fisher found herself observing Lady Caroline not with a judge's eye, nor with polite indifference, but with a gaze that held something akin to tenderness, a burgeoning protectiveness. She saw beyond the famed beauty, beyond the languid grace, to a weariness, a fragile thread of loneliness that resonated with a forgotten part of herself. One afternoon, watching Lady Caroline's sketch in the garden, a stray tendril of hair fell across her cheek. An almost forgotten impulse stirred within Mrs. Fisher, a desire to smooth it away. It was a maternal flicker, soft and unexpected, a recognition of vulnerability that surprised Mrs. Fisher herself. It had been decades since she had felt such an uncomplicated surge of affection. Lady Caroline, in her quiet solitude, had unlocked a chamber in Mrs. Fisher's heart she had long believed sealed shut. And then, quite suddenly, like a sunbeam piercing a long-shuttered room, the thought arrived. She was sitting on the terrace, bathed in the golden light, the air soft as silk against her skin, the distant sea a shimmering expanse of sapphire. The world felt vividly, overwhelmingly real, and so did she. An astonishing realization dawned, unfurling with the delicate precision of a flower opening to the sun. She was not merely observing life, she was living it. She was here. She was present, she was alive. The words echoed in her mind, a revelation that brought not fear, but a profound, almost giddy sense of wonder. She felt the warmth in her veins, the beat of her heart, her own breath. She was not a memory. She was not a relic. She was not waiting for an ending. She was here now, in this moment, vibrant and breathing, capable of feeling, of connecting, of being asterisk. The notion was both simple and revolutionary, an unexpected gift bestowed by the enchanted air of San Salvatore and the quiet warmth of companionship. She was not dead yet, not by a long, beautiful shot. Chapter 18, Lady Caroline's Epiphany. Lady Caroline Dester, the radiant scrap, whose beauty was a legend in drawing rooms and on the covers of society magazines, had always worn her detachment like an exquisite gown, shimmering, untouchable, a perfect defense. It was a strategy honed over years, a shield against the intrusive demands of a world that adored her appearance but rarely cared for her person, cultivating an enviable aloofness that kept emotional chaos at bay. She was, and always had been, mistress of her own elegant, solitary domain. Yet, here in the blossoming embrace of San Salvatore, under a sky that felt impossibly blue, the walls of that carefully constructed fortress began to shimmer differently. No longer did her aloofness feel like freedom, but rather, surprisingly, like a prison. The silence around her, once a comforting companion, now echoed with a hollowness she hadn't dared to acknowledge. Her beauty, that glorious, demanding gift, which had been her passport to every coveted circle, now felt less like an asset and more like a barrier. It kept people at a respectful distance, admiring, yes, but rarely truly connecting. She was seen, worshipped even, but never truly known. A strange, insistent ache began to stir within her, a craving she hadn't recognized before. It was not for more adoration, nor for grander declarations, but for something far simpler, far more profound, genuine human connection. She found herself watching the others, particularly the Wilkinses, with an intensity that surprised her. Mrs. Wilkins, once so tremulous and apologetic, and Mr. Wilkins, initially so stiff and censorious, had undergone a transformation that was nothing short of miraculous. Their renewed love, born afresh amidst the lemon groves and sun-drenched terraces, was an almost palpable thing. Lady Caroline saw it in the gentle, almost shy way Mr. Wilkins would now offer his wife a bloom from the garden, in the soft, confiding glances they exchanged over breakfast, in the quiet laughter that bubbled up between them without preamble. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was an unassuming, deeply rooted tenderness, a comfortable understanding that had blossomed from shared experience and rekindled affection. There was a quiet joy in their companionship, a mutual warmth that permeated the villa, a subtle but undeniable current of happiness that she had, until now, dismissed as utterly irrelevant to her own glittering existence. But as she observed them, a truth began to crystallize in her mind, clear and sharp as the Tuscan light. This unassuming, ordinary love, this shared intimacy, possessed a richness, a profound sustenance that her own magnificent isolation utterly lacked. Her beauty, her independence, her carefully guarded emotions, they were all exquisite ornaments, but they offered no comfort, no real warmth in the face of this deeper, more resonant form of human joy. Lady Caroline, the untouchable scrap, suddenly understood with startling clarity that beauty, however absolute, was simply not enough. It was a currency that bought admiration, but never true belonging. And for the first time in her life, she yearned for the latter with an unfamiliar, aching intensity. Chapter 19. The landlord arrives. The golden light of afternoon at San Salvatore had a way of softening edges, of melting away the small anxieties that clung to one like city dust. The women, each in her own way, had blossomed under its benevolent gaze. The air itself seemed woven from tranquility, scented with jasmine and the distant tang of the sea. They were enjoying the quiet rhythm of their days, a harmonious quartet of souls discovering the gentleness of shared solitude, when the spell, ever so slightly, began to waver. A faint, persistent hum grew into the distinct thrum of a motorcar engine, winding its way up the ancient, dusty track that led to the villa. It was an unusual sound in this forgotten corner of paradise, an anachronism that pricked the peaceful silence. A cloud of dust billowed, then settled, revealing a vehicle, and from it, a figure emerged. He was of middle height, with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, and an air of slight bewilderment that seemed at odds with his purposeful arrival. This, then, was Mr. Thomas Briggs, the owner of San Salvatore, the reclusive, bookish gentleman whose property they had so happily, if temporarily, usurped. He blinked in the bright, unfiltered sunshine, scanning the sun-drenched terrace, his gaze falling upon the group of women. And there, amidst the pale stone and vibrant blossoms, sat Mrs. Arbuthnot, Rose. Her beauty, which in London society was often cloaked by her own reserve, here at San Salvatore was illuminated, almost ethereal. The sun caught the faint gold in her hair, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheek, the perfect line of her profile. She was a vision, a veritable masterpiece of quiet grace, and Thomas Briggs, a man who had perhaps loved books more than people, who had certainly loved the idea of beauty more than its startling reality, was utterly, irrevocably undone. His heart, a reliable, if somewhat dormant, organ, gave a sudden, unfamiliar lurch. He had expected tenants. He had not expected this asterisk. He had anticipated the rustle of papers, perhaps a polite but brief exchange, certainly not the sudden, bewildering onset of an emotion he hadn't known he possessed in such intensity. He felt a blush creep up his neck, a curious mix of delight and acute embarrassment. Rose, utterly unaware of the seismic shift she had just wrought in the soul of her landlord, simply continued to gaze out at the distant sea, a picture of serene detachment. The quiet equilibrium of San Salvatore, a piece so carefully cultivated by the four women, now faced a subtle, yet undeniable, complication. For Mr. Briggs, the arrival was not merely a matter of property inspection, it was the sudden, overwhelming realization of a romantic ideal. And this new current, this distinct male presence charged with unexpected longing, subtly altered the air. It was a faint tremor on the surface of their tranquil pond, the introduction of a new, unpredictable element into their enchanted April. The peace remained, yes, but now it was tinged with the possibility of a different kind of human connection, one that might either deepen or disrupt the harmony they had so lovingly found. Chapter 20, Frederick's appearance. The very air seemed to hum with the unspoken anxieties of Frederick Arbuthnot as he alighted from the train at Santa Margherita. Each turn of the wheel, each mile across Italy, had only deepened the knot of dread in his stomach. He pictured his Rose, not in the quiet dignity he associated with her saint-like existence, but in the throes of a passionate, illicit affair. He had convinced himself, through a labyrinthine logic born of fear, that she had absconded to this foreign villa not for solace, but for a lover, a shadowy figure waiting in the Mediterranean warmth. His steps up the path to San Salvatore were heavy, laden with impending scandal. He braced himself for a scene, a confrontation worthy of melodrama. But what met him was not a clandestine rendezvous, but the gentle hum of an Italian afternoon, the scent of wisteria, and the sight of Mrs. Wilkins and Lady Caroline Dester in quiet conversation on the terrace. Then, she appeared, Rose. Not flushed with illicit desire, not draped in silks of seduction, but simply Rose. Perhaps a little softer, a little brighter, but undeniably herself, standing amidst the unexpected calm. The silence that followed was not the dramatic quiet he'd anticipated, but a strained, delicate thing, stretched taut between them. Frederick, armed with accusations he now found utterly baseless, yet clinging to a hidden truth, could only stare. Rose, in turn, saw the accusation in his eyes, the years of their unspoken grievances suddenly made visible. There was no thunderclap, no tearful embrace, only a palpable awkwardness that settled over the sun-drenched terrace, a testament to the chasm between husband and wife. He was a man prepared for war, confronted by a quiet, blossoming garden, entirely disarmed. Yet, as Frederick stood there, stiff and uncertain, something profound shifted within Rose. She saw him not as her persecutor, but as a man lost, confused by a reality defying his fearful imaginings. And in that moment, the elaborate edifice of her saint persona, built brick by careful brick over years of self-denial, crumbled. The sheer futility of it all became blindingly clear. Why cling to a guise that offered no comfort, no genuine connection, especially now that she knew the taste of true release? The air of San Salvatore had stripped her bare, not of dignity, but of pretense. She looked at her husband, no longer with the weary endurance of a saint, but with the clear-eyed resolve of a woman reborn, ready to discard the heavy cloak of her self-imposed virtue forever. Chapter 21. The Great Reconciliation. The air at San Salvatore, so often a balm, now held a delicate tension for Rose and Frederick Arbuthnot. The walls of their long-standing, meticulously maintained distance had begun to show cracks, exposed not by confrontation, but by the relentless, gentle warmth of the Italian spring. It was Frederick who, with an uncharacteristic earnestness, found Rose alone in the small library, gazing out at the sun-drenched terrace. His usual light-hearted gallantry was absent, replaced by a quiet sincerity that startled her. "Rose," he began, his voice softer than she remembered it in years, I've been thinking." He paused, searching for words, a rare sight for the man of letters. "About us. About how things have been." Rose turned, her expression unreadable, though a flicker of something surprise, perhaps vulnerability, crossed her face. For years, she had worn her severity like a shield, a necessary defense against a world, and a husband she felt misunderstood her. Indeed, Frederick. Her tone was carefully neutral, but the usual icy edge was dulled by the sun and the strange, persistent hope that had taken root within her. He stepped closer, his hands clasped behind his back, a gesture that for once seemed less like professorial pomp and more like genuine apprehension. "I realize I've perhaps not been the most attentive. Not in the ways that truly matter. I've mistaken your quiet strength for a lack of desire for genuine connection. And I've been a fool." Rose's breath caught. To hear him admit fault, without a hint of his usual charming deflection, was revolutionary. "And I," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, the words tumbling out before she could reclaim her usual composure, "I have perhaps made myself too difficult to approach, too guarded, believing that if I gave an inch, I would be entirely overrun." A wry, almost painful smile touched her lips. "I thought you found me tedious." Frederick moved to stand directly before her, his blue eyes, usually so quick to amusement, now filled with a deep, sober light. "Never tedious, Rose. Perhaps formidable, but never tedious. And I found your reserve a puzzle I was too lazy to solve, instead retreating into my own world. We built walls, didn't we? Brick by brick, misunderstanding by misunderstanding, until we could barely see over them." The admission hung in the air, heavy with unspoken years, yet paradoxically light, as if a great weight had been lifted. The honesty, raw and unadorned, was a bridge they had unknowingly yearned for. Later they drifted into the garden, the conversation continuing in hushed tones, each revelation a thread in the tapestry of their neglected past. The jasmine perfumed the air, and the Italian sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of apricot and rose. It was there, amidst the ancient stones and vibrant blossoms, that Frederick stopped, turning to face Rose fully. His gaze held hers, a profound understanding passing between them, an acknowledgement of shared regret and shared, nascent hope. Slowly, tentatively, he reached out, taking her hands in his. And then, with a tenderness that spoke volumes of rediscovered affection and nascent desire, he leaned in and kissed her. It was not the perfunctory peck of distant spouses, nor the passionate embrace of new lovers, but a soft, hesitant joining of lips that felt like a quiet promise. A symbolic reclaiming of what had been lost, a gentle affirmation of a future they might yet build together. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the beauty of San Salvatore, the years of estrangement began to dissolve. The kiss was a silent vow, a shared breath of reconciliation. They stood for a long while, simply holding each other, the comfort of their nearness a potent, rediscovered balm. The restoration of intimacy was not merely physical. It was a deeper, more profound return to mutual respect, an understanding that beneath the carefully constructed personas, they were two vulnerable souls, capable of giving and receiving love, and that perhaps they always had been. The Enchanted April, it seemed, had finally worked its magic, transforming two strangers into partners once more, ready to navigate the world, hand in hand, with newfound clarity and a quiet, blossoming joy. Chapter 22. The end of April. As the golden days of April began their slow, inevitable descent towards May, a delicate, bittersweet melancholy wove itself into the sun-drenched air of San Salvatore. The last mornings were spent not just in languid enjoyment, but in the quiet, purposeful act of preparing for departure. Trunks were being packed, their contents carefully folded, imbued with the faint, sweet scent of wisteria and lemon blossoms that clung to everything. The servants moved with a quiet efficiency, their familiar presence now tinged with the knowledge that this enchanted interlude was drawing to a close. Each lingering gaze at the azure sea, each final stroll through the fragrant gardens, was savored, etched into memory with the sharp clarity of impending loss, yet also with a profound gratitude. The castle, which had initially felt like a rented dream, had transformed into a living, breathing entity that had cradled and transformed them all. And amidst this farewell, a most unexpected love had blossomed, defying all expectation and circumstance. Lady Caroline Dester, the beautiful, weary socialite, found herself utterly captivated and captivating Mr. Briggs. Their initial interactions had been marked by her aloofness and his quiet, almost awkward devotion, yet the magic of San Salvatore had worked its peculiar alchemy. She who had fled the relentless pursuit of eligible men had found solace and genuine affection in the unassuming, steadfast gaze of a man she would never have noticed in her London world. Their future was now intertwined, a silent, joyful promise spoken not in grand declarations, but in the shared warmth of hands, the knowing glances, and the mutual understanding that their lives, irrevocably linked, would begin anew beyond these ancient walls. The promise they all carried back to England was not merely one of shared memories, but of profound, internal transformations. They were not simply returning home, they were returning *change. Mrs. Wilkins, no longer a timid echo, had found her voice, her laughter, and a rekindled passion for life and for her husband. Mrs. Arbuthnot's saintly severity had melted into a gentle compassion, her heart open to forgiveness and an enduring, vibrant love. Lady Caroline, once burdened by the superficiality of her existence, now possessed a deep, authentic happiness. And even the formidable Mrs. Fisher had softened, her rigid solitude giving way to a nascent affection for her companions and a warmer view of humanity. The wisteria-draped castle had been more than a holiday retreat. It had been a crucible of rebirth. They would leave San Salvatore, yes, but its magic, its lessons, and the boundless joy it had awakened within them, would travel with them, forever woven into the very fabric of their beings, ready to bloom anew in the colder, grayer landscape of their English lives. Welcome, dear listener, to a practical journey, a personal pilgrimage towards your very own San Salvatore. Just as 4 women found unexpected renewal amidst the wisteria and sunshine, so too can you cultivate a deeper sense of peace and joy in your daily life. This isn't about escaping to Italy, but about bringing a piece of that enchantment home through a simple, yet profound, 7-day action plan. Let's begin our transformation. Hask days 1 and 2, identify your London rain and plan a micro-escape. Think back to the grey, relentless drizzle of London that epitomized the character's initial discontent. What is your London rain? What are those persistent stressors, those small, nagging frustrations that dampen your spirit day after day? Perhaps it's the constant notifications, the cluttered workspace, an unfulfilled promise to yourself, or simply the relentless pace of modern life. Take some quiet time today, perhaps with a cup of tea or coffee, to gently observe these internal and external pressures without judgment. Jot them down, even if just a few words. Don't try to fix them all, just acknowledge them. Now for your micro-escape. Once you've identified a drop or 2 of your London rain, devise a tiny, immediate antidote. This isn't a grand vacation, but a deliberate, 5-minute pause. It might be stepping outside for a breath of fresh air, listening to a favorite piece of music, closing your eyes and focusing on your breath, or simply savoring a quiet cup of tea without distraction. The key is intentionality. For day 2, build on this. Can you extend your micro-escape to 10 minutes? Can you choose a different stressor and find a new small way to momentarily step away from its influence? This is about cultivating pockets of peace, not eradicating every challenge. Days 3, 4, and 5 reconnect with nature. Sans digital distractions. The magic of San Salvatore was inextricably linked to the vibrant beauty of its garden, the sea, the sun-drenched hills. You don't need a Tuscan villa to experience this restorative power. For these 3 days, make a conscious effort to immerse yourself in nature, however small your available slice of it may be, and crucially, leave your digital devices behind. On day 3, find your nearest park, a local garden, or even a tree-lined street. Take a walk, not to exercise, but to simply be *. Notice the texture of bark, the rustle of leaves, the scent of damp earth, the shifting clouds. On day 4, perhaps you sit by a window and simply watch the world outside, observing birds, raindrops, or passers-by without the filter of a screen. If you have a plant, take a moment to truly look at it, touch its leaves. On day 5, seek out water, if possible a fountain, a stream, or even just listening to a recording of ocean waves. Let the simple, unadulterated presence of the natural world soothe your senses and quiet your mind, allowing the stresses of your London rain to gently dissipate, much like mist beneath the Portofino sun. Ash days 6 and 7 extend an olive branch to a strained relationship. Dusk's the heart of the Enchanted April lies not just in personal transformation, but in the healing of relationships. Mrs. Wilkins and Mrs. Arbuthnot, Lady Caroline and Mrs. Fisher each found their hearts softened, their perspectives broadened, and old grievances shed. For the final 2 days of our plan, consider a relationship in your own life that feels distant, fraught, or simply in need of a little warmth. On day 6, choose one person. Instead of dwelling on past hurts or frustrations, think of a small, genuine gesture you could make. It doesn't have to be a grand reconciliation, but an opening, an invitation for connection. Perhaps it's a sincere compliment, a brief text expressing appreciation for something specific, or a simple, unexpected act of kindness. The goal is to extend warmth, not to demand it in return. On day 7, reflect on the impact of this gesture, however small. Was there a subtle shift? Even if not, how did it feel to you to initiate kindness? Could you follow up with another small step, like suggesting a brief, casual chat? Remember, the transformation in relationships, much like the budding wisteria, begins with a single, gentle intention, slowly unfurling into shared understanding and renewed affection. This 7-day plan is not a magic cure, but a conscious cultivation. It is your invitation to bring the spirit of San Salvatore into your everyday, reminding you that true enchantment lies not just in distant lands, but in the choices you make each April, and indeed, every day of the year. May your own personal San Salvatore blossom with peace and joy. As our enchanted journey through San Salvatore concludes, 3 profound insights emerge, lessons as timeless as the Italian sun itself. Firstly, ask environment shapes character. This isn't just theory, it's the living truth for every woman who stepped onto that sun-kissed promontory. From London's grey drudgery, a world away, we saw souls not merely adapting, but fundamentally transforming. Mrs. Wilkins, once a timid shadow, bloomed with irrepressible joy, her spirit unfurling like the wisteria. Mrs. Arbuthnot shed her pious suffering, finding authentic warmth. Even weary Lady Caroline found peace. The light, the scent, the beauty stripped away societal veneers, revealing the vibrant people they were always meant to be. We are, indeed, different people in different settings, awaiting the right one to reveal our true selves. Our second realization, Akstrisk, it is never too late for transformation. Consider formidable Mrs. Fisher, seemingly carved from stern Victorian marble. Advanced in years and rigid in habit, she initially embodied dead leaves from a bygone era. Yet, even her walls crumbled under San Salvatore's charm and her companion's warmth. She softened, observed, and transformed from a censorious judge into an almost affectionate participant, proving age is no barrier when the heart is open. Similarly, for the Arbuthnots, burdened by years of marital misunderstanding, their April escape offered a profound chance to rewrite their narrative, discovering new depths in their relationship. Finally, and most beautifully, Ashk's generosity of spirit leads to happiness far more than rigid duty. Mrs. Arbuthnot, long bound by a duty-bound piety that brought little joy, found true contentment through empathy and spontaneous kindness. Mrs. Wilkins, previously locked in resentment, discovered liberation in her free-flowing kindness. The shared experience, the blossoming of mutual understanding among these disparate women, and eventually their husbands demonstrates that an open heart, a willingness to give without expectation, truly unlocks happiness. It is not rigid rules, but the boundless outpouring of warmth and understanding that cultivates genuine joy, transforming lives, and turning an ordinary April into an enchanted one. This is San Salvatore's enduring magic. We've journeyed together through the Enchanted April, witnessing the remarkable transformation of Lottie, Rose, Mrs. Fisher, and Lady Caroline. From their rain-soaked English lives, they found not just a villa in Italy, but a profound renewal, a sun-drenched sanctuary that peeled back layers of expectation, allowing their truest selves to blossom. San Salvatore became more than a place, it was a mirror reflecting what they truly needed. And as we close this chapter, I ask you, our cherished listener, where is your San Salvatore? What is that sacred space, that quiet moment, that unexpected escape, or even a cherished memory, where you feel most authentically yourself? A place where the world's demands fade and only peace remains. Literature is a conversation, so I sincerely invite you to share your reflections and your own San Salvatores in the comments below. Your stories inspire us all. If this rich, immersive experience, this dedication to bringing stories to life through humanized audiobooks, has resonated with your heart, I warmly encourage you to join our community. By subscribing, you ensure you'll be with us for every future adventure, every carefully narrated tale that aims to transcend mere words and become a vivid, living experience. Become a part of our ongoing narrative journey. And speaking of transcendent narratives and the profound healing power of nature's embrace, our next selection promises another exquisite voyage into renewal. Following the sun-kissed revelations of the Enchanted April, we will journey to a different, yet equally transformative landscape. Our upcoming book explores how the untamed beauty and quiet solitude of a specific natural setting can mend fractured spirits, illuminate hidden truths, and offer a profound sense of belonging. It's a perfect continuation for anyone who found solace in San Salvatore. Thank you for allowing me to be your guide through this beautiful April. Until our paths cross again in another story, may your own life be filled with discovery, joy, and many, many San Salvatores.